Namaskar, good evening and welcome to this special video on StudyIQ English IAS. I am Bhuvan Apurvaja. Cleopatra, Queen of Egypt, is back in the news thanks to a controversial docudrama series on a popular OTT platform. Now the controversy surrounds itself in the realm of Cleopatra, whether she was a black or whether she was of Greek origin. Now what we do know is that Cleopatra had a Greek ancestry. However, the fuss is that a black actress portrayed the character of Cleopatra on the silver screen. Now this whole fuss gives us an opportunity to look at the role and place of Cleopatra in Egyptian history. It also gives us an opportunity to discuss whether creative licenses should factor in and over and above historical accuracies. All this and more coming in this video in a short while from now, as I, Bhuvan Apurvaja, will escort you in this special video where we take a look at the life and times of one of the most famous queens across the world, Queen Cleopatra. First up, let's try and understand who indeed was Queen Cleopatra. Now, she was a queen of the Ptolemaic kingdom of Egypt from 51 to 30 BC, which essentially is a lineage of Ptolemy, who was a compatriot of King Alexander the Great. Now, she was the last active Hellenistic ruler. Hellenistic is essentially an attribute to her Greek origins. Now, why is she famous, you might ask? Well, she has often been portrayed as the lover of Julius Caesar and the wife of Mark Antony. Now, was this all she was? Is that all that she was? Well, no. What we do know right now is that her paternal line can be traced. Not much information is available in the public domain about her maternal line. Now coming to Queen Cleopatra. She is celebrated for her skillful diplomacy, charisma and beauty. Please notice, I have noted down beauty at number 3. Why? Because she was a lot more than just a pretty face. She had immense political acumen. Her diplomacy and her diplomatical skills were well known. She was adept at making strategic liaisons, so much so that she was able to consolidate power for herself by killing off her 2 brothers. Imagine this, a woman ruler in a world dominated by men. She was also adept at speaking Egyptian, a first for any Greek ruler who wanted to learn Egyptian. This was seen as Cleopatra trying to imbibe the Egyptian ethos. She also averted famine in her state due to her skillful negotiations, her diplomatic skills, all coming to the forefront as Queen Cleopatra arrived at the stage of Mediterranean. Now the femme fatale image, the popular femme fatale image that has been cultivated over time of Queen Cleopatra. She has become synonymous with a character who uses the whole machinations of a seductress to find her way along. Well, thanks to the Roman writers, that has been cultivated over time. We'll also be discussing why that happened and whether Hollywood has played a part in making sure that characterization of Queen Cleopatra continues till this date. Now this is a tweet that has been put forward by the Ministry of Tourism of the country of Egypt. What they say? Well, statues of Queen Cleopatra confirm that she had Hellenistic features, Greek features, distinguished by light skin, a drawn-out nose and thin lips. Now these are the famous portrayals, in fact, of Queen Cleopatra over the years. We have had this recent docu-series that has come on a popular OTT platform, and we had Elizabeth Taylor, who famously portrayed Cleopatra in the 90s. Now, this leads us to the question, is her skin color indeed important? Here is a queen who dominated at a time when it was dominated by men all around her. Yet here we are focused on the physical appearance of this individual. How fair is that to her reign? How fair is that in the overall context of her rule? Moving forward. Now, to understand Queen Cleopatra's current importance and the current controversy, may I take you, my dear viewers, back to 1961. At that time, the Nubian monuments, these monuments in Egypt. They're a UNESCO World Heritage Site now. Now these Nubian monuments in Egypt, they had flooded. Why? Well, Aswan High Dam was being constructed at that time. Due to this flooding, American President John F. Kennedy, now he decided that he was going to help out the Egyptians. He pledged a $10 million relief. During that speech to the Congress, the US Congress, trying to rationalize his help for the Egyptians, this is what the US President says. We have had a special interest in the civilization of ancient Egypt, from which many of our own cultural traditions have sprung, he says. Now bear in mind that this is a time of Cold War. Obviously, countries are trying to get every other country, at least the two major powers, are trying to get each and every country on their side. However, so casually has Cleopatra been appropriated by John F. Kennedy. At the same time, a person from the US government, an official from the US government, puts it something like this: that the Nubian monuments are great historical roots of all Western civilization. We are doing our own future generations in this country a favor, insofar as we are helping to preserve their own historical roots. This is not a bilateral gift in any sense. Please understand the relevance of these words coming out of the US government. Essentially, appropriating the whole Egyptian and the whole Nubian monuments for themselves, when actually they belong to Egypt. Going forward, now to understand the criticism against this popular OTT platform. Now the criticism stems from the fact that modern Egyptians do not find a representation in the characterization of their favorite queen. Right? So why has this happened? At times in the names of Western civilization, and at other times in the name of Afrocentrism. Now what exactly is Afrocentrism, you might ask me? Well, it is looking at the worldview from an African perspective. This initially came out as an opposition to Eurocentrism, wherein every particular hero or incident was being looked from the European lens. Afrocentrism came as a reaction to it. Now, this colonialist attitude has manifested itself widely over the years. So you have Egyptian cultural artifacts that are no longer in their possession. At the same time, egyptomania has been seen. Now you must have seen, especially in say American popular culture, a lot of particular places have Egyptian pharaohs that have been placed. You have had in fact the Washington Monument, an obelisk figure that draws its inspiration from Egyptian architecture. In Las Vegas you will find particular hotels having pharaohs and all of the Egyptian monuments represented a replica of some sorts. This essentially is Egyptomania, this renewed interest in Egyptians and pharaohs, essentially depriving the Egyptians of this agency to control the narrative. Indeed, when we go forward, we take a look at the problems that have come through because of this attitude. Now, the writings of ancient history has suffered from racial bias and marginalization of scholars from formerly colonized nations, much like India, where our history was written by those who were not Indians. Similarly, in Egypt too, their history has been written by everyone else but Egyptians. It's a field that was once sponsored by the colonizing forces and now is shrouded in racism towards modern-day Egyptians. The fact that they lack a voice in controlling the narrative around their heroes, their queens, their history has been a lacking. So at this moment, my dear viewers, a more pertinent question for us all to consider would be, rather than figuring out what the color of Queen Cleopatra was, can we figure out whether Egyptians indeed, how is it possible to empower them further at this particular point of time? To what degree are Egyptians involved in producing and writing the history of Egypt is an important question that all of us must consider at this particular moment. So, can these issues be resolved just because a well-meaning American producer decides to cast a black actress as Queen Cleopatra? Well, evidently no. In fact, in doing so, what has essentially been done is following the footsteps of John F. Kennedy and France and all the other machinations that came in after that. essentially you're depriving the Egyptians of the agency to write their own history, to write Egyptian history from the perspective of Egypt. So, if we understand the Egyptian anger at this particular moment, well, it's not a lot to do with the fact that a black actress portrayed Queen Cleopatra. In fact, most of the comments that you see is essentially that, is it a case of revisionism? Are you challenging the anti-black racism in the United States, and for that, are you essentially rewriting someone else's history for them? How fair is that, is the question that I put forth to you, my dear viewer, at this particular moment. When you look at it in the Indian context too, well, obviously, say Queen Cleopatra on this popular OTT is a docu-series. However, closer home, when you look at it, so you're an Olympian from the Northeast is portrayed by an actress from North India. This cultural appropriation, this misrepresentation of heroes, is this accurate? Is this creative license? Or is accuracy of the storytelling more important? Now obviously that was a particular movie wherein you're allowed creative licenses. But this particular Queen Cleopatra example is a docu-series, which means it draws its facts, it draws its inspiration from facts, which means there needs to be an element of authenticity to it. Again, I leave the question to you, dear viewer, as to whether this is justified. And now we come to this, the popular image of Queen Cleopatra over the years. Essentially a queen who has just been reduced to a beautiful woman. But was she all that it was? No, not really. In fact, if you believe that Hollywood was the one who attributed this beauty queen tag to Queen Cleopatra, well, you would be most wrong. The story so goes that after Queen Cleopatra and Mark Antony were overthrown by their adversary, Queen Cleopatra committed suicide. Now, Octavian, the person who was the adversary, was a Roman. Mark Antony was a Roman. So the Roman authors thought, well, how do you pit a Roman against a Roman? So essentially, they created this image of Cleopatra as the femme fatale, as this evil woman, this seductress who used and manipulated these Roman men to figure her way out and become a success. That stereotype has been carried forward since the time of the Roman authors. Indeed, Hollywood also has played its part in normalizing that particular image of Queen Cleopatra. So, Queen Cleopatra was a convenient scapegoat. Octavian claimed to have waged war against the foreign queen and not Mark Antony. In this way, Antony could be portrayed as a virtuous Roman who was led astray at the machinations of this seductress. Cleopatra was cast as an irresistible and exotic femme fatale, and Roman writers picked up this theme and Hollywood writers continued on that theme. Before I go forward, my dear viewers, indeed, in fact, one statement that I would like to submit before you is that beauty is indeed in the lies in the eyes of the beholder, but power is a powerful, strong aphrodisiac. Indeed, you cannot visualize and you cannot understand Queen Cleopatra's relevance in the times that she was in just because she was successful. You have to understand that here was this woman in this sea of men rulers still holding her own on the basis of her political acumen, knowledge and her diplomatic skills. An ardent linguist, she was very good at making speeches and engaging the audience. A lot more than just femme fatale, I would say. So at this moment, my dear viewers, two questions is what I would like to post before you. Number one, is the portrayal of Cleopatra a creative decision that should be seen as alluding to the centuries-old debate about ethnicity as well as Egypt's multicultural population? Or is the portrayal riddled with historical inaccuracies that perpetuate misconceptions about the real origin of the queen? What's the stand that you are taking? Where do you stand in this particular debate of historical accuracy versus creative license? What's your rationale? Let me know all of that and more in the comment box below. And if you did enjoy this particular video, Make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll be back with another video tomorrow. Till I see you again, thanks for watching. Good night.